Today we're going over emergency descents and how you should do them on your check ride to really impress your DPE and show them that you know what you're doing. So whenever your DPE during a check ride, anytime they give you a scenario and they're wanting it to lead to you doing a maneuver of sorts or seeing your emergency procedures, they want you to treat that like a real life situation, and they're going to also treat it like a real life situation when it comes to grading you. So if you're not able to actually complete that, or you don't have a full understanding of the emergency procedure, then they're probably not going to pass you, because in a real life situation it's going to be even more stressful and even more challenging to complete those procedures. So with an emergency descent, there's different reasons why we'll do them, but we're going to get into the what, why, and the how. So an emergency descent, what it is a steep bank, excessive pitch, down, turn to lose altitude as quickly as possible. Why we do it? If we have an engine fire, emergency with passengers. So an engine fire, the reason why we're going to want to do an emergency descent is because when we pitch down and we're losing all that altitude really quick, our airspeed is going to be really fast, and there's going to be a lot of airflow coming over the engine. So that air intake at the front of our plane, the air's going to be moving through there really fast, moving through the engine, over the engine really fast, and it can put out the fire. If we have an engine fire, our engine's going to be out after that, regardless if we put the fire out or not. But we want to do the emergency descent to put the fire out so it doesn't spread, and that we're still able to make a gliding, engine out landing, versus our whole plane catching fire and then there's no chance of us landing and surviving. And then emergency with passengers, there could be other reasons for doing a emergency descent too, but I guess it's just like your best judgment that you would use when you're in a situation, and if you come upon something different besides these two, then you might use your best judgment to make a decision to do an emergency descent. But the other one is emergency with passengers. This is like someone on your plane is having a heart attack. The only way for them to get help is by you getting them to the ground and them getting help on the ground. So in that case, you would want to just get into an emergency descent to lose altitude as quickly as possible and get them to the ground as quickly as possible. We don't want to just do a normal landing and fly to an airport. I mean, like, their life's on the line. They're having a heart attack, so we want to land as soon as possible. Any other emergencies with passengers that are like life-threatening and you're working against time would be a good decision to do an emergency descent. All right. Now, how we do it. So you're always going to want to look in your POH for your airplane specifically to see how you're supposed to do maneuvers and how emergency procedures are supposed to be done. So check airplane POH. But with my plane, it says to do, literally just taught this whole thing and then realized that I forgot the power idle part, which is very important. So up here, before you even bank, you're going to do power idle, then you're going to bank, then you're going to put your flaps in, then you're going to pitch for this airspeed. We're pulling our power idle because we're going to be descending very fast and we're going to be pointed at the ground because of this pitch right here, and we're already going to have a really fast airspeed because of that. So we don't want to have power in there because that's going to make our airspeed even faster, and then we run into the risk of overspeeding the plane. So we don't want to do that. And also, if we have power in, that's kind of contributing to our vertical lift, and it's causing us to not descend as quickly. So pull power, obviously, when we start a descent, we pull our power back. So same thing, we want to lose altitude, so we're pulling our power back. bank 30 degrees, 25 degrees of flaps, which in my plane is just 2 notches, and then so now we're going to pitch for an airspeed above our flaps extended speed. When I used to fly in Cessnas, what we used to do was just bank like 45, and then we would pitch down for below, like we didn't want to exceed our never exceed speed, so we'd be like in the yellow arc-ish, and that's the airspeed that we would pitch for, meaning that we were in like a greater pitch down attitude and in a greater bank than we are in this situation, and we didn't use flaps. So I feel like that's kind of the more normal way to do it, but my Piper Warrior, this is what it says in the POH, so that's what I did because we're always going to listen to our POH, and so the reason we do VFE is because we have our flaps in, so we don't want to exceed that speed and cause structural damage to the aircraft. So you're just going to bank 30 degrees, put your 2 notches of flaps in, and then you're going to pitch down just above your flaps extended speed. So it's really important that you know your flaps extended speed if this is how your airplane is supposed to do emergency descents. That way you like know right off the bat, okay, my flaps extended speed is 111 or something. So I know I should pitch for 110 or below, because you're not going to have time to look in your POH in one of these situations. So we pitched for our airspeed, and now what you're doing is literally just descending to the ground. So on your check ride, I believe that they want you to descend to 1,500 feet AGL. So since we have this bank in, we're losing vertical lift. So when we're flying, we have vertical lift and horizontal lift. When we are just flying straight and level, there's no bank being added or anything. We have no horizontal lift and we have a lot of vertical lift. So there's something that's causing us to descend and lose altitude. But as soon as we get into a bank, part of our vertical lift is getting lost and it's getting contributed to the horizontal. So our vertical lift is decreasing and our horizontal lift is getting more lift contributed to it, and that means that we're going to start descending because we don't have that extra bit of vertical lift. And in this situation, that is good for us because we're trying to lose altitude as quickly as possible. So adding this bank in is going to really help us to lose that altitude. And like in the Cessna, how we used to do it, we even banked to 45, which the more bank you have, the more vertical lift you're going to lose, the faster you're going to lose altitude. So that's why we add the bank in. Then I'm not really sure why we add flaps in the Piper Warrior. I don't have an explanation for it. I had to teach emergency descents on my CFI check ride. Like I had to get up in front of him and teach it on the whiteboard, and I taught it exactly like this. Everything was good the way I taught it, except he asked me like, why are we putting the flaps in? Because he was like, I've never seen that before. And I was like, I honestly cannot tell you, like that's just what it says in the POH. And he even thought about it and he was like, I don't really get it either because it doesn't really make sense, but it's just what my POH says. So now the reason we're pitching for our airspeed that's just, well I guess technically it would be just below our flaps extended speed is because we want our airspeed to be as fast as possible, meaning we're pitching down as much as possible, and our airspeed is the fastest as possible, meaning we're getting airflow of our engine, we're losing that altitude, but without exceeding it, exceeding a safe airspeed. So in this case, our flaps are extended, so we don't want to go above that VFE. So we're going to stay just below it. That way we get the maximum altitude loss in this situation. And now what you're doing is just descending in that bank, and you're basically just like spinning to the ground. Not spinning, you're just banking in a turn as you lose altitude going towards the ground. And once you get to about 1,500 feet AGL, that's on your check ride when you're going to roll wings level, pick the nose back up. And now back to, we're descending down to this because in a situation, you don't want to just keep going all the way to the ground because you do need some time to figure out your landing and make a safe landing. So you want to give yourself about 1,500 feet above the ground level for you to be able to set up to land and get everything figured out. If we're doing it because we have an emergency with our passengers, we might want to look at the closest airport and descend and then get to that airport and land, especially if they're having like a heart attack. Even though it may be quicker to just like land in a field, land on a road, getting them to an airport might actually save time in the long run, because there could be medical services at that airport or someone there that could help, and most likely there's going to be someone there who can drive them to a hospital, and there's probably a hospital closer to the airport than it would be to just land in a field. So get them to an airport where they can get help. If it's an engine fire, our only priority is getting the plane on the ground, because now we don't have an engine. In this situation, we are pulling the power ourselves, getting into this, and then once we get down to the ground, we can add our power back in. But with an engine fire, we're pulling that power out, and then we're doing all of our checklists for an engine fire, which means like turning off our heating sources, all of our fuel sources, stuff like that. And once that engine fire is out and we don't have an engine anymore, we're just landing without an engine. So either way, we're going to descend to 1,500, and that will give us time, if we're landing in a field, to get set up to land in the field, things like that. Now, engine fire, just like I said, while we're doing all this and while we're descending to the ground, you should be turning off heating sources, fuel sources, stuff like that, so that we're not fueling the fire. And yeah, so back to the flap situation on my check ride. So I had to do an emergency descent on my private check ride and on my CFI check ride. Private check ride, we did an engine fire, so I did simulate like I'm pulling the power for all this stuff and that I'm landing in a field. My CFI check ride, I had a passenger with a heart attack, and so when I taught it to him on the ground and I mentioned this, he was just curious and wanted to see what actually would be quicker, because that's the main goal, is to get to the ground the quickest. So I did my maneuver on my check ride. I did the flaps and everything, and I think I got down in about a minute. And then he did the same thing, and he took controls and did it without flaps, did it at a steeper bank and at a steeper pitch down angle, and he did it in about 45 seconds. So it's not that far off, but I guess in a situation like that, every like second counts. But how I did it on my CFI check ride was, he was just like, okay, you have a passenger with a heart attack. I said, okay, we need to get to the ground as quickly as possible. We're pulling our power, we're banking 30 degrees, we're pitching down just below our VFE. Now we're just descending to the ground. I'm watching my altitude, I'm watching all my instruments. And then I got to 1,500, I rolled my wings level, picked my nose back up, and then I said like, okay, there's an airport right over here, like 3 miles or whatever it was. I was like, we're just gonna head in that direction, land, get this person to help. So that's pretty much it for emergency descents. An engine fire, obviously you have like a little bit more steps involved with like turning everything off, things like that. You also have to like pick a good field to land in. And then once you get out of your emergency descent, you have to pitch for best glide speed, because now you're just doing a emergency landing. Both situations, you want to declare an emergency if you have time. On 121.5, squawk 7700, which is our emergency squawk. And in a engine fire, you have to complete a engine out landing, probably in a field or somewhere that's not the most ideal. So that adds a little bit more stress and a little bit more steps. But yeah, that is emergency descent for engine fire or an emergency with a passenger. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe on this video. And if there's things that you guys want to see, then let me know. On my TikTok and Instagram, I'm doing kind of like a private pilot series. So if you're prepping for your private pilot check ride, then definitely go follow me on there, because I'm posting a question of the day from my check ride that kind of stumped me or just were a little bit challenging. So it'll be on my Instagram, which is flyaddison with 2 N's, and then my TikTok is addison.pilot. questions will be on both of those platforms. Also, I do online ground lessons. So there's a form, Google form in my Instagram bio and my TikTok bio you can fill out and just give me some of your information so I can contact you, and then we can get a ground lesson scheduled. It's $50 an hour, or you can buy a package of 4 ground lessons that are good for 2 months, and that is $150. So you're pretty much getting one lesson for free. And I have about like 8 people scheduled right now, and I have a few more people that I need to get in contact with. So people are enjoying them and really finding them helpful. But I think within like the next like couple weeks, I'm gonna set up a private pilot check ride ground lesson like package. So basically, if you're prepping to take your private pilot check ride, you can schedule ground lessons with me, and we're gonna do a simulated check ride. So I'm gonna treat it as if I'm your DPE and you're the student. You're coming to me to take a check ride. I'll have a full check ride already typed out and everything. And basically, we'll just get on the Zoom and I will just act like a DPE, and I will treat it as a normal check ride to prep you guys for your check ride. So if that's something you're interested in, then comment below. So that way I know how many people are interested. And yeah, then follow my socials so you can see when that's gonna happen. But yeah, that's it for emergency descents, and like, comment, and subscribe.